dominates the entire life of human.
It's the planet that enables us to analyze, to discriminate, and to apply logic. Right? Of course, it's the planet of communication.
In current scenario, I've seen Mercury and Venus combination as a combination of digital marketing.
Mercury's like a teenager. If it's hanging out with other good teenagers, virtuous teenagers, it behaves very well, right? Sometimes if it's hanging out with delinquents, then it becomes more delinquent itself.
I have seen people who have got Buddha and Shukra together. So they are very expressive in relation, very expressive, but mostly intellectually, not by heart.
Namaskar, and welcome to yet another episode of Astrolog Podcast. I'm Anjita, an astrology enthusiast and your host. On our channel, we discuss important issues related to astrology and allied sciences with the world's finest astrologers, astrology teachers, and Vedic scholars. And here we are today with a very special podcast. We are about to discuss a very important planet, a planet that governs versatile intelligence, logic and reasoning, all kinds of communication and expressions, our business acumen, and like our guest said, it governs astrology. Yes, dear ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing the solar prince, planet Mercury, the planet of wit, humor, and intelligence. And to discuss this amazing planet, we have here with us two important guests, Shri Marc Boney and Shri Alok Khandelwal. Marc Boney is an internationally renowned astrology teacher, writer, and a consultant. He has held positions in corporate world as Director of Human Resources and Organizational Development Consultant. He has also authored 32 books. Sri Alok Khandelwal is a renowned astrologer, astrology teacher, and an entrepreneur practicing astrology for more than 24 years. He is also the founder and managing director of Astrolog, which is a premier institute in astrology education and consulting. Welcome, Marc, Alok, sir. Thank you for coming to our show today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Marc, let's begin our session. And my first question would be to you. Let's begin by understanding planet Mercury in astrology. Who is Mercury and what is the primary role of Mercury in a native's chart?
Well, first and foremost, Mercury is the planet of the intellect, right? And as you said, it's the planet that enables us to analyze, to discriminate, and to apply logic, right? Of course, it's the planet of communication. In the Greek tradition, it was the messenger of the gods, right? So it relates to all forms of communication, both verbal and written. And just like all the grahas, it has so many significations, right? In terms of human anatomy, it pertains to the nervous system, for example. And so, but it's a very critical planet in that sense because it has so to do. So the two mental planets are who? It's the moon, right, having to do with our emotions and so on and so forth. But the other mental planet is of course Mercury. So a good, well-situated, strong Mercury in a horoscope can be a very beneficial thing for a person to be able to have good intellectual functioning, right? And so, but just like any graha, of course, it has many, many significations. We were talking before you started the streaming that, of course, Mercury is the planet of astrology. So you'll see people who are getting very interested in astrology. Very often that happens in a Mercury major period. And one of the factors in a birth chart that shows good capacity for astrology is a strong and well-placed Mercury, right? So this is the way I would answer your question initially.
Okay, Marc. Alok, would you like to add something? What is your opinion on our planet Mercury?
Obviously, Marc has covered most of the things, but I want to add one thing, which is now has become very important nowadays, is It is a karka for the 10th house. So, so obviously, most of us lives in two, spend most of our time in two aspect of life. One is career, one is relationship. And these two planets is basically Buddha and Shukra, which is near to the Earth. So it is basically into the inner circle. So these two planets, Buddha and Shukra specifically, dominates the entire life of human being. There are very few percentage, maybe 2%, 3% of the people who are interested into spirituality or maybe religiousness and other stuff like Jupiter or maybe of Saturn, Vairagya. But come what may, we have to deal with Mercury in our life. So intelligence, learning capacity, as your title says, humor, then nervous system, and most importantly, money and career. So these two things becomes very important nowadays, especially in Kali Yuga, and that's why this planet is super important nowadays for me.
So I would just add to that, it's the planet of commerce. It's one of the natural significators of the 10th house in that way. Right?
Yes.
So, of course, so many people are involved in some sort of commercial enterprise, some sort of commerce. So Mercury being a natural significator of that, it's an important element from that standpoint.
Okay. Mark, as we know that Mercury has lordship of two signs, Gemini, which is an air sign, and Virgo, which is an earth sign. So how is the Mercury of Gemini different than Mercury of Virgo?
So Gemini just has to do with ideas and concepts. All right. Virgo, being an earth sign, has to do with the practical use and application of those. So when we're just talking about someone who's brainstorming, right, and sort of just, having ideas and having intellectual conceptions about something, an intellectual understanding about, that's more of a Mercury and Gemini sort of quality, right? Whereas Virgo, being an earth sign, how do I use this information, right? In what way can it be utilized, and in what way it can be practically applied? So that's really the difference between the idea of Mercury and an earth sign, the rulership of Virgo, versus Mercury in a pure air sign, which just has to do with pure intellectualization. This is the way I would see as being the difference. Of course, when Mercury is placed in either sign in a person's chart, it's a very good placement for Mercury, right? Mercury will have a source of strength, but there is a difference between them, as I've talked about.
Okay. Alok, sir, what would you like to add in this?
Obviously, the Mool Trikon sign of Mercury is Virgo, and then Mercury itself is a earth element, and when it is placed in Virgo, it is, you can say that it is stronger than a Mercury into Gemini, and both, as Marc has said, both has different signification. But how I see it is like Virgo rules the sixth house of Kalpurus charts. So Mercury in the Virgo is basically more about discipline and, as he said, implementation of the ideation derived in Gemini. So both Mercuries are important for us, but obviously Mercury in Kanya is stronger, and it is like on. And when you say about Mula Trikon, it is I say it is office of the planet. So it is more into action when it is into Virgo, more into ideation or conceptualization when it is into Gemini.
So just to add to that, if you don't mind, Mercury, of course, is got a better placement than in Virgo than Gemini. Of course, between 0 and 15 degrees, it's said to be exalted. And then, of course, there's always a actual degree within a sign where a planet reaches its extreme exaltation, which for Mercury and Virgo would be 15 degrees. And then thereafter, from 15 to 20, it would be considered Mula Trikona, second best. And then from 20 to 30, it would be just considered own sign. So there's these subtle differences about what kind of results and how strong Mercury is in Virgo, depending actually on its exact degrees. The best place for Mercury is at 15 degrees of Virgo, right? Yes. This is where you get the absolute best expression of Mercury.
Okay. Mark, as we know, Mercury is a natural benefic. But in a chart, if it's with a malefic, it becomes malefic. And if it's with a benefic, then it, of course, acts as a benefic. So how do we interpret this dual nature of Mercury? I mean, how do we,
Well,
what do we think about it?
I like to joke is that Mercury's like a teenager. If it's hanging out with other good teenagers, virtuous teenagers, it behaves very well, right? Sometimes if it's hanging out with delinquents, then it becomes more delinquent itself. But you have to be careful with that at the same time. It is true that Mercury, when it's with natural malefics, can express unfavorable things more, right? Whereas if it's with natural benefics, it then becomes more of a natural benefic itself and can give more favorable results. But let's be clear also that even Mercury combining with natural malefics can form good planetary combinations, good yogas. For example, with Virgo Lagna, Virgo ascendant, Mercury is going to rule the first house. Saturn, a natural malefic, is going to rule the fifth house. But I can show you charts where there's a combination of Mercury and Saturn forming a good Raja Yoga, a combination that could give a person status and position. Now, could it also have some unfavorable sides to it, being with that natural malefic? The answer is yes. Okay. So you can never, sweeping generalizations are typically never true. But in a general way of speaking, of course, if Mercury's with other natural benefics, then it's going to give a more benefic result itself. So, we have yogas like Saraswati yoga, right? Which is defined by when all the natural benefics fall in angles or trines 2 and 11. And of course, if they're in strength, it can be a yoga that inclines a person towards learning, right? Someone who loves to learn, someone who's typically well educated. And of course, if the planets have strength, then all the better that inclination. So yes, it makes a difference who Mercury is associated with in terms of what kind of results it gives. But let me, say something else. Say Mercury is with Mars, a natural malefic, right? This can give to a very, someone who has a very sharp logic, someone who has a very quick wit. I'm thinking of the chart of former US President John Kennedy, who had Virgo on the ascendant. Of course, Mercury would then rule the ascendant. And his Mercury was very closely conjunct Mars in Aries. And he was known for his humor, he was known for his wit, and he was known for his very incisive intelligence. So it's not always a bad thing that when Mercury is with natural malefics, they can still have a good side to them.
Okay. So, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, obviously, as all the classic states that Mercury, when combined with malefic, uh, change the nature. Why it happens? Because it is a planet of intellect. So, and since it is Kumar Graha, it is a teenager planet. When it is aspected or conjunct with any malefic, the intellect becomes like this. So, for example, as Marc said, Mercury with Mars, or Mercury with Saturn, Mercury with Rahu can give you a specific sort of intellect. It can be good, it can be bad as per your profession, but the intellect is easily dominated by the malefic planet. That can be a beauty of Buddha, or that can be a disadvantage of Buddha also. I have seen Mercury, when combined with malefic, gives very very bad result in the dasha. If a person is not, for example, if it is a uh, homemaker's chart, or it is a person who is like normally working in a company, then if it is dominated by a malefic planet, can give you bad result. Obviously, for a politician, Mercury with Rahu, Mercury with Mars, even Mercury with Saturn can give you very good result, because the intellect, the position or the profession needs that kind of intellect. uh, uh, as he said, that for a specific lagna, any Raja Yoga will give the result, but the individual planet will also give the result in the nature of the person. So Raja Yoga has to manifest if any Kendra or Trikona planet has made some combination. Since it is ruling your Vata, Kapha, Pitta, all three, as well as Mercury has the power of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. It is Lord Vishnu. So when it is malefically influenced, or maybe not well placed in the chart, can create a disbalance in all these prakritis. And I've seen some of the results. When the dasha comes, the person can have maybe some uh, nervous system related issues, or maybe some bad decision making can come.
Quite true.
Okay.
If I could just add one thing too. So the sun in Jyotish is classified as a mild malefic, right? But at times, but in the combination of Mercury, since Mercury never gets that far from the sun, it's very common in charts to have Mercury conjunct the sun. But under certain circumstances, it becomes what's called a Buddha-Ditya yoga, right? So Buddha is one of the names, the Sanskrit names for Mercury, Aditya for the sun. It can be translated splendor of the intellect, but only when Mercury or the sun are together and they are related to either the first house or the fifth house. And Mercury should not be combust. And of course, if they have a source of strength, this is a very good Buddha-Ditya yoga. And a person will, in that case, typically have a very exceptional intellect and very good intellectual functioning. And could be also have a very great wit. I'm thinking of the chart of Oscar Wilde, the very famous English playwright, who was known for his wit. Okay, he had Leo rising, Leo ascendant, ruled by the sun, and he had the sun conjunct Mercury in the third house, which, by the way, has to do with things like writing plays and so on. And it wasn't combust. The sun has a source of strength. Mercury had a source of strength, and it had a really excellent Buddha-Ditya yoga. And his really good intellectual functioning and his ability to have his witticisms were very much a reflection of that combination in his chart. So it wasn't a bad thing for his Mercury to be conjunct the sun at all. Now, I'm getting a little technical there, right? But, I hope it's understandable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, of course. Now, here, this is a good point you've raised, Marc. I would like to use this opportunity to talk to you about Mercury combustion. Now, there are many schools of thought here floating around. Some say that, okay, yes, since Mercury is closest to sun and it never goes very far from the sun. So in most of the charts, as you said, it is with sun and it is combust. Now, there are some set of astrologers that say that combustion is maybe just an astronomical phenomena. It's not a very astrological phenomena. So what is your take? Do you think it is actually combust?
First of all, that's just not true, okay? In the sense that combustion is not just an astronomical phenomena, meaning Mercury being close to the sun or the sun being close to any other graha. Combustion is a very real thing. Now, it depends upon the closeness of degrees, but invariably, if a planet is truly combust and doesn't have any sort of what I call compensation for that, meaning if it's not strong in some other ways, then its natural significations will be harmed, as will the indications of the houses that it rules. And the ancient texts give combustion as being something that can bring about what's called yoga bhanga, meaning you can have a good yoga, but it can be canceled or it can be diminished as a result of the combust condition of the planet that's forming the yoga. And so this is not just true of Mercury, but the other grahas as well. But anyone who says that combustion is merely an astronomical phenomenon, not an astrological one, that's just not true.
Okay, good. So,
well, let me add something. Let me add something though. You can't go overboard with that, because I can show you some Mercuries that would be considered to be combust. Take the chart of the very famous Indian movie star Amitabh Bachchan. If you look at his Mercury, first of all, it's in the sign Virgo. So it's very strong in that sense. And it's also very closely conjunct the sun. And if you see what happened in his Mercury major period, you can see that he had some real ups and downs that happened as a result of that. And that was partially related to the fact that his Mercury is combust. But because it was strong in other ways and actually formed some very powerful Raja yogas, of course, he had some really great successes as well during that time. So it's you have to do a whole judgment based not just on one factor like combustion, but to see the whole picture.
Alok, sir, what are the typical results that can be seen if Mercury is combust in somebody's chart in terms of his reasoning, logic?
So first we need to understand what combustion is. I would like to put it into a very normal common sense thing. It is
Okay.
Surya or the sun close to Mercury, right? So first is obviously some part of the Mercury is not visible. I mean, the some rays of the Mercury is not coming to the Earth. This is the astronomical thing, because Surya is so close, and for that matter, for any planet, if Surya is combusting the graha. Now, what happens in case of Mercury, as per my understanding, is Surya is the father, Mercury is the son. For, I mean, not directly mythologically, but if you consider Surya is the parents and Mercury is a kid. Now, when Surya is closing to, or sun is is very close to the Mercury, there is a pressure created by sun on the communication part. So people who have got combust Mercury, it is a high possibility that they would not be able to say their thing upfront. They can take some time, because, and Surya is the social pressure, maybe, or pressure from the authority, pressure from the father. Although the father role is to protect the son also. So what is happening is, when Surya is with Mercury, I have seen these people can be protected or maybe pampered. So these people can be protected and pampered, because they will get less opportunity, because when the father is sitting, the son will get less opportunity to speak. Obviously, Rishi Parashara has, in all the shlokas I have seen, he has criticized combustion as if like he will start like if the planet is combust, debilitated in enemy sign. So combustion is considered negative by Rishi Parashara. But I have seen that obviously in the dasha of any combust planet, specifically Mercury, you will feel pressure in terms of wealth, because it is a karka of the 10th house and the currency. So you can have this pressure. And secondly, your decision making can be wrong. So the hesitation of social pressure comes into Mercury combustion, which I have seen. I have not seen that people are not intelligent. They are very intelligent people,
Hmm.
but there can be a little bit of hesitation, or maybe the timing. So Mercury is all about timing also. So timing of the communication can go for a toss. Although Amitabh Bachchan is known for the timing.
Yes.
You know, I'm going to add one more thing, if you don't mind, that might seem a little controversial. I began noticing over and over again that planets that were not just, near the sun, but were almost at the exact degrees of the sun, that is, within 1 degree of the sun. Oprah Winfrey, the very famous talk show host, right? Usually successful talk show host. Her Venus is less than 1 degree with the sun. And she got huge fame and success as a talk show host in her Venus major period. So this is not a concept from Jyotish, but I remembered a concept from Arabian astrology where there's this idea of Kazimi, meaning that when a planet is within 1 degree of the sun, it is in what's called the heart of the sun. And I actually did a research on this and wrote an article about this and showed example after example about how such a planets don't seem to get burnt, which is what combustion means, and get rendered rather impotent. They actually become something of a powerhouse. And you would see that that applies to Amitabh Bachchan's Mercury-Sun combination as well. I used his chart in my example. Now, again, this might be a controversial thing, but I'm just sharing what my observations are and what my research has been. And I agree totally with sir in the sense that just having a combustion Mercury doesn't mean you're unintelligent. Right?
And I
Doesn't
would
mean.
like to add and support your statement, Mark, because I have a Venus within 1 degree of Sun,
Okay.
and and I've been always supported by females.
Right.
So in fact, I run an ad agency, so you can understand
Oh,
that.
okay. All right. Yeah. So
So
yeah, I could have used your chart in my research.
that's what I'm saying, this that you can use my chart also in that.
Very good. Let's go on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, now let's talk briefly about the phenomena of retrogression.
Hmm.
please tell us what exactly is retrogression, and what are the some of the common results that a native has in his chart when he has or she has a retrograde Mercury.
So this is a very complex question, all right? But just to have people understand what retrograde means, moving backwards, right?
Yes.
And it's not a real phenomena. Planets in their orb around the sun never move backwards, all right? It's an apparent phenomena based on our geocentric point of view. And the way to understand this, think about two automobiles going in the same direction on a highway next to each other, right? They're both going forward, but if one's going faster, it passes the other. And from their perspective, it looks like the other car next to them not going as fast as going backwards, right? So again, it's not a real phenomena, it's an apparent phenomena. So that's the astronomy of it, okay? Now, what kind of results a retrograde planet gives, that's a whole huge question that, again, I've written some articles about. The common idea is that retrogression is not a good thing for a planet. My own teacher, K.N. Rao, talked about how the planet can then sometimes behave rather erratically and unpredictably because of this retrograde. But then there's some thought within the world of Jyotish is that in one sense, it's a source of strength. You know, we have this thing called Shad Bala, or the six strengths of a planet, one of which is called Chesta Bala, which is emotional strength. If you see the calculation of Chesta Bala, when a planet is retrograde, where it's actually closer to the Earth, its emotional strength has an increase. And so there are some Jyotishis who consider retrogression as being a source of strength. My teacher, K.N. Rao, did not emphasize that, but I'm just saying that that notion exists in the world of Jyotish. So retrograde planets are something of an enigma, you know, and you can't make sort of generalized statements about them, in my opinion. One thing I will say, we have these statements in the classical texts that a debilitated retrograde planet will give its results like an exalted planet, and a retrograde exalted planet will give its results like a debilitated planet. If you go by that, you'll go wrong, meaning you'll find some instances where that may be true, but to say generally that true, and I'll use the example of the former president of the US, Joe Biden. His Jupiter was in its exaltation sign, Cancer, so very, very strong. And it was also Vargotama, meaning it was in Cancer, both in the birth chart and in Navamsha, meaning it's exceptionally strong. Well, it was also retrograde, right? And so he had an exalted planet that was retrograde. He became president of the United States during his Jupiter major period. So again, if you applied that concept blindly, and I hear this a lot, I get asked this question a lot, you would go wrong. So that's one thing I can say about, retrograde planets. That notion that, well, just what I talked about, I don't need to explain farther than that. So I'd be interested to hear what Sir has to say.
So, what is your opinion on Mercury's retrogression?
So any planet which is retrograde is basically close to the Earth. Now, if the planet is closer to the Earth, what it is doing? It is creating maybe a pressure or maybe more impact on us. And that's why we have this Cheshtabal, as Marc was saying, and then it is considered in the Shadbal calculation, it is considered as auspicious. You give more marks to the retrograde planet. Now, what I have observed is any malefic becomes retrograde, it is creating a pressure on you. Any benefic, when it is retrograde, creating an impact on you. Maybe it is pushing you towards itself. So one thing which everybody agrees is retrogression is like planet is thinking or maybe going backward, and it is a karmic planet which wants you to do something. Specifically, when I've seen Mercury retrograde, these people doesn't speak too much, but they are super intelligent people. So they have this very strong observation power, because they are like, the retrogression means they are thinking. The planet is into a position where it is basically retrospective about the past. So they have this strong retrogression power, and when they will speak, they will give you superb idea. But it is a high possibility that they are not very talkative. Since it is a benefic, I have seen people who have Mercury retrograde and well placed. Obviously, all the other conditions should be taken into consideration. I have seen these people very intelligent. Coming to a planet who is exalted or and retrograde, or maybe debilitated and retrograde, this is a normal saying that, I mean, if it is a planet who is on exaltation, it is on the top, and then if it becomes retrograde, there is one more power coming up, right? So if you are already on the top, and then more power gives to you, you will fall, right? So I have seen, not literally, but for example, Joe Biden example, exalted Jupiter can make him the president, but as they say, it will give you an impact like a debilitated planet, like a not the exactly debilitation. So what happens is he lost the entire reputation when he continues the finishes the term. So the end result, Jupiter can make him exalted. Jupiter obviously can make him the on the top. Being a president of US is anyways, you are the strongest person in the world. But sometimes exaltation retrogression can give you some downfall. This is what I have observed.
I'd agree. I would agree.
Earlier, we have made references to Mercury having association with various planets. Now, we will talk about it a little later, one by one. But there's one association which interests me a lot, that Mercury's conjunct or association with Jupiter.
Mhm.
I feel they are very different planets. Mercury controlling more of logic, reasoning, rational, and Jupiter controlling more of the vastness, the knowledge, as we such say. Mercury controlling more of intellect, intelligence, and Jupiter controlling more of wisdom,
Right.
something like a higher learning, leaning towards spirituality. So they are very different yet similar in this way, in the sense that they both have influence over the mind, learning. So, what do you say? What is your opinion about the association of these two planets? What kind of results can we expect?
Well, generally speaking, any combination of Mercury and Jupiter in a birth chart would be a positive feature of it. Mercury, of course, represents the intellect, but also it represents like information, whereas Jupiter, as you mentioned, it's distilled information, which is, in other words, wisdom, right? So, and Jupiter's a very expansive planet, right? So, I'm thinking of the chart of someone at a strong connection between Mercury and Jupiter. They were like a walking encyclopedia, meaning they had just a very broad fund of knowledge. They were highly educated. They were extremely well read. They had those tendencies and so on and so forth. Of course, if these planets also have additional strength, they can form very, very good combinations in the birth chart. If one of them also then rules the ascendant, so if you're Sagittarius or Pisces ascendant ruled by Jupiter, or you're Virgo and Gemini ascendant ruled by Mercury, and then these planets combine, it can be a very positive combination in the chart. All other things being equal, meaning that there's not any other negative influences on the combination, right? So you like to have the planet of facts and information also conjunct the planet of wisdom. It's a good combination typically.
Alok, I would like to hear your views, of course, not only from the perspective of an astrologer or an astrology teacher, but out of experience, because you have a very beautiful combination between Mercury and Jupiter. So yes,
Yeah,
your
obviously
views.
I don't have that conjunction, but I have that exchange, and I take it into this manner, that a student is sitting with the teacher. If Guru with the combination is there in your chart, Jupiter Mercury is anyways related, maybe aspecting each other also. So if it is aspecting, obviously the teacher is continuously monitoring you. So it is like personal attention to the student, and Jupiter is the most benefic planet. If they are with each conjuncting with each other, Guru Buddha, then I have seen people that They can learn anything, as Mark has said, moving encyclopedia, and in a very lesser time they can develop the ability to teach, because the Mercury, the aim of all Mercury is to become Jupiter, right? Mercury is a student. Every student wants to become like teacher. So when they are together in any chart, they have that I mean very strong tendency to learn and teach. And since both the planets are planet of intelligence and wisdom, I see one as a Vishnu and one is Narayan. So one is information, the other is wisdom. So mostly I have seen this combination can be very beneficial in any chart. I have experienced this in my life also, that I always took less time to understand, to study something. And one thing which I have observed, because Mercury is a planet of humor, when it conjoins with Jupiter, these people have a very broad understanding of life and they take it very in a lighter manner. So life humor. I think Mark will also agree with me on this, that people who have got Jupiter, big comedians can have Guru Buddha combination, because they see the life as from the perspective of humor, and they can basically, so their sense of humor is generally very good.
They have a philosophical perspective.
Yes, philosophical humor also. So sometime.
Okay, Mark, now quickly, if we can discuss some other associations of Mercury. Uh, for example, Mercury's friends are Saturn, Rahu, and of course Venus. So Venus, of course, being a natural benefic. But
Right.
let's first talk about the natural malefics like Saturn and Rahu. Although they are very good friends with Mercury, but they're naturally they come into the malefic category. So, what kind of results can we see in a chart when they are associated in terms of conjunction or aspect wise? Of course, this is just general, broadly speaking. A lot of other things will influence the total result.
Well, you see, the difficulty is it's you don't want to make sweeping generalizations because so much depends upon which houses these planets rule, right? The condition of the planet involved.
Absolutely.
Typically speaking, if they're, if Mercury is having a strong influence of Saturn, a person tends to think in a very concrete way, right? And they may be very detail oriented, and they can deal with data and organize data. Again, if this is manifesting in a very positive way. They could also be very narrow-minded in certain sections if you have the strong influence of Saturn on Mercury. So again, it sort of all depends on the whole picture within the chart. You can't make generalizations like that. For some ascendants, as I've indicated, they can form very good combinations. I'm thinking of Taurus, for example. Saturn becomes a very special planet for Taurus. It rules both the good ninth and 10th house. We call this a Yoga Karaka planet, right? Mercury rules the good 5th house. So say 5 and 9 exchanged. Wonderful done yoga, right? Very strong connection between Mercury and Saturn, but also very powerful done yoga. So, again, it just sort of depends a lot on their other factors to see if whether they're going to be a combination that's getting mostly favorable results or unfavorable results.
Okay. Alok, sir, what is your take on the Mercury Saturn and Mercury Rahu combination?
Obviously, yes, it all depends upon the lordship and which lagna we are talking about, and the rashi also in they are placed. But what if you want to ask me generally, so then
Yes, sir.
uh, uh, so Mercury is very close friend to Saturn. Saturn is orthodox. Mercury is practical. So when these two comes together, Mercury would like to take quality of say socialism from Shani, or maybe orthodox nature of Shani, and add into the practicality of Mercury. So Mercury, since like it is a planet of present moment, Mercury, because Lord Vishnu is always into the present moment, but Saturn is a planet of past. So what happens? I have seen in Mercury Saturn combination is these people have a very stable intellect. because they can use the data from the past as well as in the present moment they can take good decision. uh, Second, I have seen some of the skin issues also when Saturn Mercury is there, because Saturn basically would like to taint Mercury as a karka for the skin. Third, which I have seen is not with the conjunction but with aspect, and I would like to take a Marc view also on this. That when Mercury is aspected by Saturn, the tendency to say lie can be increased.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but again, depends a lot on lordship. If
Yeah,
Saturn
definitely.
is ruling the sixth house and then makes that influence on Mercury, it could give rise to a tendency not to tell the truth. No question. I didn't address the idea of Mercury with Rahu. Generally, I would not say that a close conjunction between Mercury and Rahu is that favorable a situation. Rahu is the planet of delusion, right? And so, if Mercury has to do with clear thinking, the Mercury conjunct Rahu under certain conditions could give thinking that's not very clear and that can be sometimes rather muddled and maybe even delusional. I once taught my background is psychology. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I studied psychopathology, right? And so, it was very interesting to me to write a book and actually conduct a class on the astrology of mental and emotional illnesses. And so the strong influence of Rahu on the mental planets, such as the moon and on Mercury, if there's the additional influence of other natural malefics, is the kind of things that you see in the charts of people who sometimes struggle with mental emotional health. Right? Now, if there's the influence of natural benefics, additionally, that won't be the case. So again, you can't make generalizations, but as a rule, Mercury conjunct the Rahu Ketu axis, I would not consider to be all that a favorable condition within a birth chart for Mercury.
So would you like to add something?
Same with me. I will say Rahu with Mercury is an unrealistic planning because Rahu wants to always think very big, and it is like he doesn't have any legs to execute. It is only thinking, and Mercury is the planet of intellect. So when I have seen people Rahu Buddha, obviously it should not be aspected by a being benefic, but generally it will give them it can make you very intelligent, but only on the planning level, not on the execution level, because Rahu is Maya and Mercury is intellect, and both planets, Rahu is the deadly enemy of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu basically cut that Asura and make Rahu. So what is happening is Rahu and Mercury sits can create a lot of mental conflict. Uh, when you check depression in any chart, Marc, I am also MA in psychology, so I also have the same interest. So when you check depression in any chart, you will check influence of malefic on moon, lagna, and Mercury. So because if Mercury is safe, even the moon is impacted, then your intellect is safe. So when the information from the mind will come to the brain, Mercury can filter it and stop it. But if Mercury is, say, for our example, is with Rahu, then Rahu will explode that information. So it can create obsession, maybe OCD or bipolar, something of that sort can be created. So it's not a good combination as for me also, Rahu Buddha combination.
Okay. So can we talk a bit about Mercury and Shukra combination? How does Mercury's energy behave with Shukra? Venus.
Well, again, Venus is a natural benefic, so if it's the only influence on Mercury, generally speaking, for most ascendants, it's a good combination. And they're planetary friends. Mercury and Venus are planetary friends. And generally speaking, planetary friends make better combinations, better yoga combinations in a birth chart, right? So generally speaking, they are a good combination together. For some ascendants, better than others. Again, I'll come to Virgo Lagna. Mercury rules both the first house and the 10th house. Venus would rule the second house and the 9th house. In other words, One rules the strongest angle, one rules the strongest trine. This is why Parashara Hora says they're the absolute best angle trine Raja Yoga combination for Virgo, right? Now, that's not true for every ascendant. Think of Sagittarius. Mercury rules a good 10th house and a 7th house, but Venus rules the 6th house, right? So they can still be a fairly good combination, but at the same time, not as good as, say, for Virgo. So again, lordships come into play, but if I like to see a chart where there's just the influence of Venus on Mercury, generally speaking, particularly if the planets have strength or they exchange, right? This would be my comment.
Okay. So, Alok sir, I would like to ask you specifically here that Venus is the karaka of relationships, and Mercury is the planet that controls communication. So, how do you see their association on relationships, or how people relate or communicate in relationships, in your
I think
experience?
I think that's a very good question because if you see Venus and Mercury, although they are friends, right? But on the nature level, they are exactly opposite. Because Mercury is a very intellectual, practical energy. Venus is a very emotional energy. That's why one is Vishnu, other is Lakshmi. So when they are together, it is called basically a Lakshmi Narayan kind of combination. So for most of the chart, irrespective, I mean, you always have to take the lordship or the lagna into consideration. But I have seen people who have got Budh and Shukra together. So they are very expressive in relationship, very expressive, but mostly intellectually, not by heart. Because Mercury is more about intellect. You have seen, I mean, you will see people dominated by Buddha or Mercury. Uh, they are not very emotional people. They are very practical, and then they are into the present moment always, right? They are into the present moment. So when Buddha Shukra for relationship, if you will ask me, they are master into handling relationship, but intellectually, not by heart. This is what my observation is. Second is,
Yes, sir.
do you have this combination in your chart?
No, sir, I don't, but I know somebody who has this combination, and you are absolutely correct. The man is always like to his wife, is always talking about, let's read books, or what book have you read, or this is what, he will want to share his intellectual knowledge with the wife, when they're together, or when they are having tea, or when they're having lunch, rather than, going on a very romantic level.
Correct. And this is what Mercury is like. He wants to be more on the intellectual path. Second is what I have seen is in current scenario, I've seen Mercury and Venus combination as a combination of digital marketing, as a combination of maybe web development or product management. A little bit of creative combination is. I have seen people doing these kind of work, or maybe they have this ability. Doesn't necessarily mean if it is not associated with their 10th house, doesn't necessarily mean it will convert into profession, but some sort of creative ability, or maybe marketing ability. I've seen people who have got Mercury and Buddha combination, Mercury and Venus. Third is I have seen it is a good combination for creating wealth. So generally people, if the other parameters are there, they have reasonable wealth in their chart.
Okay.
I
Mark, your view.
I will add one thing. So, Venus is the diplomat, right? Or it represents sweetness. So, Mercury represents communication. So when Mercury is conjunct Venus, oftentimes these people can speak in a very pleasant sort of way, right? Where they have speech that is pleasing to others, or they speak in a diplomatic way, right? In a way that fosters the relationship as opposed to estranged peoples. Again, this is provided that there's no additional influences on there, right? That would counterindicate that. So they're pleasant conversationalists, let's say that, okay? That can be one expression of it.
Okay. Okay, Mark, now the one combination that is left is Mercury and Mars. So how does Mercury behave? How does its energy behave around Mars?
Well, I must start out by saying that I'm biased about this because if you looked at my chart, I have a very close conjunction of Mercury and Mars.
Okay. Okay.
So,
But I have seen this combination in writer's chart. Do you agree
correct.
with me?
Yes. In fact, it's interesting you should say that. I wrote an article entitled Pen and Ink, and it was
Correct.
about the way in which Mars-Mercury combinations can incline a person for authorship. K. N. Rao used to explain that Mercury represents the pen, Mars represents the ink, right? And that such combinations can, as they have in my case, particularly article writing, since Mercury rules my third house of articles, short writings, right? It can give this inclination. But, one thing, every combination can have a good side, it can have a bad side. The positive side of Mars conjunct Mercury, very quick thinking, okay? A very sharp logic, ability to present ideas and communicate in a forceful sort of way, to make one's point, you might say. Now, if it's manifesting more in an unfavorable way, someone who's overly argumentative, right? Someone who likes to verbally attack people, right? Someone who may use a lot of foul language and abusive type language, that sort of thing. So again, every combination can have a positive side, it can have an unpositive side. That's my comment about Mars-Mercury.
Okay. Alok, sir, your opinion?
I think I am already on the same page which Mark is saying. Other than this, my understanding is like Mercury is the lord of the third house in Kalpurush, and Mars is the Karka of the third house in the Kalpurush. So for sure, writers combination or maybe the players combination is there when Buddha and Mercury, Buddha and Mangal is together. Uh, in the present or the current scenario, I have seen people who are into software industry can have this combination. Specifically, people who are into cyber security or ERP solutions like SAP and other solutions, they can have this combination. Rest is I have seen writers specifically in occult, Mercury, because Mars rules the eighth house also, and sometime into the thrill. So because of Mangal, and Mangal is a planet of say violence or thrill or suspense, and then both is associated with them. Other rest, I'm fully agreeing with about the language they use or maybe the verbal attack they can do because of this combination. But one thing which I have seen prominently in the chart is very strong mathematical abilities, logical interpretation, and mathematical abilities. This is what I have seen most of the chart.
Mars is the planet of logic. So
Correct.
when combining with Mercury, a person can have very incisive logic.
Okay, Mark, before we wind up today's session, I would like to know about this beautiful Raj Yoga that Mercury creates, the Bhadra Yoga. So could you
Well,
tell us something about this
it's
Bhadra
not,
Yoga?
I wouldn't classify it actually as a Raja Yoga. It's classified as being one of what's called the Mahapurusha Yogas, right? So Mahapurusha literally means a great person. And when we're thinking about a great person, we don't mean someone, oh, he's such a great person. It means someone who is well known, someone who's notable, someone whose name people recognize. In other words, it can make you prominent. So Bhadra Yoga is defined by when Mercury is either in its own sign, Gemini, or Virgo. It's Mular Trikona and exaltation line in an angle, right? So any Mahapurusha Yoga, like Bhadra Yoga, that energy will be very strong and prominent within that person. Now, if it actually is happening in the Lagna, therefore it becomes very personal, right? Then this will be even more so. Now, with something like the Bhadra Yogas and all the Mahapurusha Yogas, the real ones will also repeat from different perspectives, meaning that Mercury will also fall in an angle from the moon, or it also will fall in an angle from the sun. If you look in the chart of the Dalai Lama, everyone knows who the Dalai Lama is, right? He's a Gemini Lagna, and he has Mercury, the planet ruling Gemini and ruling his ascendant in the Lagna. It's also in an angle from the moon. It's also in an angle from the sun. It's a part of Buddha Ditya Yoga. This is what I would call a true Bhadra Yoga, a true Mahapurusha Yoga. And of course, he is someone quite notable. So,
Yes.
with every yoga, you have to learn to qualify it. what are the conditions under which it will give its best expression, right, and really be evident in the lifetime, and what conditions will that not be the case? Bill Gates has a very strong Bhadra yoga in his chart. He has a Gemini lot, right? His Mercury goes to, and it's in an angle from the moon as well. So again, it's a really strong Bhadra yoga.
Okay. So, your opinion on Bhadra Yoga?
Completely agreeing on this, but I want to add a little bit. So Bhadra means gentleman. So when Mercury creates this Mahapurush Yoga, that means a person who is gentleman. That gentleman means he is behaving in a proper manner. He values other people also. He value himself also. And since the yoga is created by Buddha, he has to be very intelligent, little witty, always look younger from his age. That is Mercury. Always look younger from his age, and prominent person with a lot of wealth. Wealth in terms of cash, wealth in terms of knowledge also, depending upon what path of life he has chosen. Like in case of Dalai Lama, he has chosen the path of knowledge. In case of Bill Gates, he has chosen the path of business. But if the yoga is manifested properly, that means if it is from the Lagna and from the moon, it is not afflicted by any malefic, or maybe it is not combust, then it is a very good yoga to have in your chart. Any Mahapurush yoga for that matter, if it is completely manifested in your chart, it is like you don't need any other yoga to to be precise, but it has to be manifested properly. That is the thing. And the dasha should come, obviously.
Yes. Okay. So, Marc, Alok sir, we have to end this session today. Thank you so much for being with us on our session and giving us so much of in beautiful insights into this beautiful planet Mercury.
May I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
So each of the grahas relate to different Vedic deities, and Sir has related to the fact that Mercury has to do with Vishnu and his avatars, right? So the best practice to get the best out of your Mercury is Vishnu Sahasranam, meaning to chant the 1,000 names of the Lord. So even if your Mercury is, say, somewhat problematic in your chart, this is the best practice to, you might say, modify that and get a better expression of Mercury. This will be particularly true when, Mercury, you're running the Mercury period, but it's good for anyone. This was always K and Rao's recommendation, Vishnu Sahasranam. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that before we conclude.
And for Marc, for your information, I mean, we in Astrolog generally organize a class to learn Vishnu Sahasranam for all our students. And they learn Vishnu Sahasranam and chant almost daily. Sometimes we get together, maybe 100, 200 people, and chant it regularly, chant it as a Anushthan also. And we have seen remarkable changes in the ability to learn Jyotish and the ability to handle the situation, tough situation of life through Vishnu Sahasranam. It is.
I love that. Love hearing that.
Yes,
That's
Marc, and I'm a living example of that. I learned to chant Vishnu Sahasranam in Astrolog. Alok sir had organized a class, and ever since I've started reciting Vishnu Sahasranam, I do it daily without fail. I can see my life changing in so many ways. So many ways, it's unbelievable.
It's the most powerful practice. Very good. Glad to hear that.
Yes. Yes. So it's a beautiful way to end this beautiful session. So thank you once again, Marc and Alok sir, for being with us here today and talking about this amazing planet, Mercury.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right.